enforce empathy, to enforce victimization, and to create a master-slave relationship. That essentially means that where religion in itself is imposed to you, there are two things that happen. One, no one seeks consent from you. Secondly, no one cares about your belief system. And thirdly, no one cares whether you have indigenous sovereignty. To the extent where religion in itself shall be utilized, one, to expand authority by taking away your property. Secondly, to eliminate the viability of your religious practice from your community. And thirdly, forces you to adopt this. It means two things. One, you never have any opt-in mechanism. So it means that you do not have the individual choice of choosing that religion, right? And therefore, that being said, it's important for us to understand what this ongoing process of decolonization is. The ongoing process of decolonization means, one, that you're seeking psychological liberation, that a specific sort of belief system was imposed on your conscious being. And that belief system, one, has taken away the ability for you to believe in life, but secondly, it has imposed to you to be guided by religion constantly in life. To the extent where we prove to you, there has been irreparable harm in Africa and in countries that have been imposed on these colonial religions, such as Islam, such as Christianity, such as Hinduism. And secondly, we prove to you that during the age of enlightenment, the white people are allowed to absorb their religions and opt into atheism and scientific belief of atheistic belief systems, which means they had opt-in and opt-out mechanisms, but we never had the ability to opt-in and opt-out. What I'm trying to do this argument is this, right? There is no legitimacy of those religions staying. If the argument legitimacy is existing, then that argument essentially does not prove that there is sufficient preparation. Secondly, our best arguments are this, right? There is the utility of choice. People should, those structural sort of barriers of power should not be eliminated from those sort of structures. When decolonization entails colonization, including active disempowering, it means taking away all the property that the missionaries own. Secondly, taking away all the property that the Nabhani family is owning, because the Nabhani family acquired property through Said Said introduced Islam in the East African community. Thirdly, it means the elimination of the curriculum-based system within institutions who, for the first instance, instruct. Okay, ask.
So clarify, yeah, how does this process look like? Secondly, no, it's important. You're everything that is imposed bad.
No, that's the problem with them. They argue morality. This is the best argument. Let me argue the arguments, right? If I was CEO and OO, they'll say it's good to be Christian, dress, and go to Sunday school. Second, it's good to be Muslim, where the country is going to believe in going to the temple and worshipping Hare Krishna, Hare Ram. The problem with those arguments is this, right? These specific individuals never had the ability to opt in and opt out. These religions might not necessarily be bad, but to the extent they never had an opt-in and opt-out mechanism, it means that the utility of choice doesn't matter, because these specific individuals never had the ability to choose. Secondly, there is no opt-in mechanism. Opt-in mechanism might be the best argument that they make. Second, and thirdly, the malleability of religion. Religion is changing. It covers black people, brown people, blue people, and that's essentially an argument that is made. But since people have suffered irreparable harm, secondly, this specific harm will never be reversed. Thirdly, there is historical injustice that the property from your community has been taken away, means that these people demand reparation. This form of reparation means this: taking away all property that these specific individuals own. Secondly, separating religion from the state as an institution by collectively having a constitutional provision that subjects the whole state and communities that there shall be no state religion, there shall be no manifestation of Christianity within communities, and to the extent where people want to open, it's fine, but to eliminate the structural barriers that are existing. To the extent where we have slavery being justified through Christianity, we had rape justified through Christianity, we had predatory behaviors of child trafficking through these institutions, which means that injustice has already happened. To the extent we prove to you that injustice has happened, it means two things. One, these people will never get back indigenous sovereignty, whether they like it or not. When the Amazonians were running naked, you are running away from their collective indigenous communities from where they stay. Whatever they believe in, whether they worship stones, stars, suns, because essentially people choose what they believe in. It doesn't matter. To the extent where you impose that on them, it means any institution that has been established to where those proprietary interests of those communities are, they should be banished. But secondly, curriculums that seek to advance and indoctrinate religion upon individuals simply because religion is being sold as a victim's mentality and the vindicative behavior of it it means that religion in itself should be eliminated. What is active disempowerment? I've told you what it entails, because they'll argue about it all, they would say this and that. Active disempowerment means elimination of those systemic structures. Secondly, active disempowerment means elimination of those curriculum religions from community systems. If you go to the rural areas, you'll find almost 100 churches. Simply because these specific individuals never had the choice to accept that these churches should be essentially established. But even secondly, there was a veil that was established against them, meaning that they would never ever exercise any of the community code. I'll take your POI.
So what is necessarily the difference between fundamentalism and decolonization? Because the problem is with religion, not the decolonization.
The problem with you want to argue religious fundamentalism is something very important, right? So when people fundamentally want to be Christian, we don't care about other things. We don't care about the African individuals. We don't care about worshiping stones and everything. Our argument about ongoing colonization is elimination of structures that were imposed to you without any form of choice. But the second, elimination of institutional structures, because these specific individuals have power and have power. But then thirdly, why is it legitimate? Because if we prove to you legitimacy, we won this debate. These people never had the ability to consent. Secondly, it was involuntary in nature. Since that involuntariness exists and master-slave relationship exists, it means this form of injustice creates the glorification of these religions. But then second, elimination of these institutions won't reduce religion ultimately. It's going to give these people the margin of benefit to essentially go back to that religion and unlearn and learn. That's decolonization. You unlearn something, then you opt in if at all you find it viable. But then secondly, it eliminates this structural power that has been existing over time. Structural power meaning that you do not have the ability to essentially practice whatever that existed before you. The reason why these individuals have identity crisis, belief system crisis, and everything is because they were victims. Secondly, they can only complain in our contemporary societies. Thirdly, they don't have the ability. Active disempowerment means banishing these institutions, elimination of these institutions from the crisis, and providing people for religious liberation without expectation.
We all agree that homosexuality is not by default in the modern setting an African thing to be actually appreciated in Africa. In 2014, the Uganda government actually came up with an anti-gay law, and immediately this law was signed into office or into authority by the president. The next day, the headline is read: the United Kingdom and United States of America actually have stopped funding to Uganda. And what did this lead? It led for the president, the coward that he is, to actually retract his signature and take the bill back to Parliament. Well, ever since then, it has sat in the archives of Parliament. So what does this show, ladies and gentlemen? We believe, yes, the religion played an active role in the colonialism. But then in order to front the argument of decolonization, what we need to fight is neocolonization together with decolonization. Because we see they still have other powers that actually influence us rather than religion. For example, we see that these governments actually control most of the multimedia, whereas most of the media in the world is actually owned and operated by the Western world and the former colonies. When you talk about BBC and all these other powers, so they control the media. And when they control the media, they actually control what we believe. All the things that we actually get from them are actually anti-African in nature, and because they're anti-African in nature, this multimedia, the multimedia influence they have over us actually is also a form of colonialism, because they actually control the narrative, and because they control the narrative, actually, we cannot actually have or achieve decolonization. I'll take it.
First, decolonization is even in the parameters of the debate. But even second, how do you achieve eliminating decolonization within the status quo?
Thank you. I want to get to that in my argument. Now, also, we seek economic independence, whereas our laws, as I've shown in our case study, are actually independent and need to be actually in line with what they say. If they have economic power, we as third world countries, we as Africa, and generally poor continent, we actually rely on their resources. If they can pull the plug on our resources, if they pull the plug on their funding to us, then we are in a state of dependency. When we are in a state of dependency, that is why they still have this pull on us. Now, why is it inconsequential to this debate, whether or not, why is it inconsequential to this debate that we should actually actively disempower religions? Because number one, ladies and gentlemen, contrary to what they say, saying that there was no concept of choice back then, we believe we have concept of choice right now. We believe that since independence, no one has actually been coerced into any religion, because we have actual frameworks of freedom of worship, and you can choose to actually belong to ATR, you can choose to belong to Islam, you can actually choose to belong to any religion you want. So when he came here and he talks about no opti-mechanism, and they had the opti-mechanism in the Renaissance times, we believe Africa's Renaissance was in the post-colonial era. African Renaissance was when we achieved our independence. Now, the only scenario where their argument was, well, as these religions have no, where there is no consent to actually enter these religions, where there is no opti-mechanism and no psychological liberation, this belongs in a pre-colonial time. But if we are to accept, we are actually independent countries, then, and we have freedoms and rights as actually given to us by the UN Charter. We believe we have freedom of choice, we have freedom of worship, we have freedom, and no one we actually give our consent to every religion we go for.
Disempowering means those powerful structures such as missionary institutions exist.
Thank you so much. I'll go back to that. I may be Ugandan, but I believe that it's not the Catholic Church or Islam that actually write the national curriculum for this institution. We believe that governments have been empowered to actually work on the role of the people. This is why representative democracy actually exists. This is why Kenya has a National Council for Actually Education. We believe that the psychological liberation has actually been attained. To give you a case study, this is Strathmore University. Strathmore University is a Catholic institution. Aren't we actually debating whether or not religion should actually be maintained in this context? And now we're doing at this university. So meaning that their argument, by nature of the fact that actually Strathmore students actually holds no water in this debate. So we believe that actually the disempowering religions will not actually achieve decolonization, because we see that most of these countries are actually moving away from religion. For example, the UK, Germany, all of them have gay laws. All of them are participating and having laws that are actually contrary to what the Bible says, or that inherent religions actually say. Now, we see that even Islam, whereas women are not allowed to pray, but women were not actually given equal rights, we see that these traditionally Arabic countries, such as Saudi Arabia and all these other countries, are adopting equal rights for women. We see that these former colonial powers no longer believe in the power of religion and have shifted to other means and mechanisms to actually undermine African independence. As I've shown you number one, optimally for religions. Now they influence our laws, and they influence our laws because of the money they give us, because of the economic dependence we have on them. So in order for us to actually dwell with neocolonialism, in order for us to actually colonize Africa, we need to actually emancipate ourselves economically. We need to reduce our dependence on that world. And since my time is constrained, if I am not able to do that in my speech, my deputy will do so. So we believe that more pertinent than religion or disempowering religion, what actually holds more water in this debate is to fight the form of colonialism known as neocolonialism. Because with the onset of neocolonialism, through control of the media, through the control of money and economy, we see we'll never actually decolonize. In order for us to decolonize, we need to actually get economic independence. But even this religion actually plays an active role. We see that most of the people in Africa, despite being African, subscribe to these religions. And because they subscribe to these religions, we believe religion is subject to interpretation. We believe that the interpretation of the Western world of these religions were actually false. For example, the Anglican Church, for example, the Catholic Church, because the Bible never advocates for slavery, not as the Quran. Otherwise, the Jews would still be enslaved to the Egyptians. We believe that their interpretation of this Jewish and laws were wrong, and we have our own interpretation. And the interpretation of African religion, first of all, there is consent since democracy was established. On top of that, these are uniting factors, and we have people who actually subscribe to these religions away from colonialism. And because this exists, they actually have unity, and we might face a massive backlash from the people if we actually disempower them. People believe in these religions independent of colonialism, but their own free will and consent, and that's why it's time to rank above opening opposition. Thank you.
So a few points here. So the thing is, I really think religion might have just a bit greater influence, considering the idea that religion is what are the characteristics that really describe this kind of life, and why we think being, at least to an extent, we think our goal is a marginal benefit. We think we want a world in which being Christian is not a predetermination. Despite the fact that your parents do to a very good extent decide your religion for a period of more than 10 to 15 years, we think it is critical that for most individuals, the concept of approaching religion is really not covered by a huge barrier. Huge barriers that you either go to Christianity or Islam, or at least 3-4 other actors. We really think that it has at least a marginally greater influence, considering it's in the ears of these people, and they are being told they should obey a superior power who lives in the clouds for some reason. So to this extent, I shall hope to tell you why. We think that religion, or at least the religion that was introduced during colonialism, is very similar to colonialism. In fact, we might as well call them the same thing. So why do we think this is there? What are the characteristics that really describe this kind of life? And why we think being, at least to an extent, we think our goal is a marginal benefit. We think we want a world in which being Christian is not a predetermination. Despite the fact that your parents do to a very huge extent decide your religion for a period of more than 10 to 15 years, we think it is critical that for most individuals, the concept of approaching religion is really not covered by a huge barrier. Huge barriers that you either go to Christianity or Islam, or at least 3-4 other actors. And we think this is important. So what are the elements that we think really mirror the concept of colonialism? You find that during colonialism, religion was introduced particularly to pacify individuals in order to make them more compliant to these forces by the colonial government. In today's world, you find religion is used by the state to control the people. You tell the people that they should obey their God. During the 2013 year, you have churches that were praying for Uhuru and Ruto to stop being persecuted by the ICC after contributing to violence. And because they were listening to the idea in church, all reason was left outside as they went to listen to their father. We tell you that reason is abandoned in these scenarios. We tell you that there is control that is used in these religions. We tell you that there is something particularly problematic about the religions from colonization. We think that religions that seek to encroach, to eat everything that is on their way. This is a problem with religions that have that crave to capture everything on their ways. This is a symbol of imperialism. They are trying to take all that is in their way. All religion, at least 80% of religions that were once in Africa have pretty much been eradicated because of the encroaching of these religions that are really targeting to take over the lives of these people. And religion has very particular meanings. It has meaning to the people of a place. It has significance. In central Kenya, you have the people looking onto the mountain, and that is their belief, and this gives them meaning. But in this world, where we are colonized, and now you are introduced to the idea of the God of Mount Zion, the God who lives in a continental way. We think it is important that we respect the values of religion, the value that people attribute to their community, and the desire to relate your religion with your community and have values that are feasible. We think it is very important. These religions slowly seep in and seek to take over everything. And you see, the problem is, they believe the answer is one. There is one God. So basically, our premise is you are all wrong. It is just a matter of time for you to join us. And we think critically, as time goes by, this was empowered by the colonial government. And you are put in a situation where you are basically born into a system that is self-perpetuating. You become involved in the system, and you really cannot see a world outside of this. And we think this is really important, because it really tells you you are unable to move from a mentality of being colonized, from a mentality of thinking that it is okay to be poor today because there are bananas in heaven tomorrow, which really it's a very bad mentality. You should not bank your eggs on something you really cannot see. We think this is problematic. We think there are forced barriers that exist. The fact that when you go to school, you are either accepted to do CRE or IRE. It's basically it's like, which way are you going? You have to go somewhere. We think this is very characteristic of colonization. We think that if religious structures really do not have this amount of control, one, we still accept that there are people who choose religion. We are not trying to create a world where religion is not a thing. We are trying to create a world where religion is not such a powerful entity in society. And this is mostly because it was a group of people who came into a land, a foreign land, a land whose beliefs are different from them, whose value systems are different from them, and they impose their foreign beliefs and this is the truth. Every one of us swears on God or Jesus Christ. Do we really think that is not a problem? That the fact that your natural impulse is based on another community's version of God. We think communities really need to develop religions that are significant to them, that are significant to their areas. Because we really don't think that the purpose of religion should be far-reaching. We think it should be to take in the needs of the people and to protect them.
You're distracting me. Let me continue. You waste your time.
So, O tells us, people believe in this religion by free will. I think it is by virtue of not having another perception of how things could be. There's this book called the British Gulag. You find that there are prisoners who are taken during colonial time and given Bibles to read about how to be calm, about how to turn the other cheek, about how to not fight the aggressor, about how to obey whoever is in power. It is chosen by God. That is a person who should be unquestioned. Do we not find it odd that religion has so many leaders who are really problematic, and they really get away with the idea that they are chosen by God, so these leaders are really bulletproof. And we think this really shows the problem of colonization. Having an imposed master who will really do whatever he wants with you. The idea of a master and a slave relationship is really the extent of religion. You are basically here to be told what your master wants and you have to fulfill it however it is. So, how exactly does OG fulfill the idea that in the process of decolonization, we think it is of value to reduce the power owned by these institutions? We think children should not have to be forced into this. We don't think it should be part of your grading in school. We think it can be an option, but not such a strong option that was backed by the colonial government, and the interests were further protected by the people who remain in government today.
In my speech, I'll be exclusively showing you why, even if we stop believing in the God of Mount Zion, we do not necessarily do away or mitigate the factors of how the decolonization process is achieved, right? So important to note exclusively what OG fails to do. We think that this debate is about achieving decolonization. This debate is about drawing a nexus on how religion in the current day actually does prevent the process of decolonization. Exclusively we get nothing from that. They just have a problem with being controlled by God and the God of Mount Zion, and we think that's very important. We shall be engaging with it. So this is why even if we don't believe in Mount Zion, the God of Mount Zion, this is why decolonization is actually going to continue by even when they actively disempower. In my speech I'll be giving one, I'll tell you why religion is not even the major actor in the decolonization process. But first, secondly, I will show you why, I'll show you what the problem is, but most importantly, what then will happen, or what harm will it be to actually actively disempower religion in regards to achieving the decolonization process. Two things to note here. In the leader of opposition, he told you explicitly why we are still actually having a slow process of decolonization. We brought it to your notice, one, that these people still control the mass media. Neocolonialism, right? They fund everything we do. One, that is to say that Europeans still continue to have an active participation in what happens to one, our lawmaking process. Two, how everything derives. So we think that if that is not decolonization, then we don't know what kind of decolonization or colonization government is in. So we think that with the existence of these various things is the major problem why this process is either slow or not actually being achieved at all. Notice three things, Chair. They told you about the utility choice, and they told you about why it is important to force people to live. Now, this is where the problem is. Actively disempowering religion. Let me give you the context of how this works in Africa. One, people are affiliated to religion or actively believe in religion. So, actively disempowering is going to bring up three major problems. One is going to divide them. Hence, they're going to be very reluctant on actually doing the decolonization. Why? Because people are inherently affiliated to these religions. Whatever it is actually that is said in these religions is something very important. So, actively disempowering them is going to divide them, but consequently it is going to even lengthen the process. Because why? People are very affiliated that even if you wanted to actually actively disempower them on that ground, it's going to take a lot of time. Two things, you don't achieve decolonization, but most importantly that you even divide the Africans. Three, the struggle is even more weakened. Why? Because the only way we can actually use religion to actually achieve decolonization is because it is already a unification point. We already have a ground, it's like more of a cultural structure, where we have a ground to actually tell people about decolonization, once the solution best achieved in Africa, because then inherently people believe in this kind of decolonization. But again, it quickens the process because it is where people are most affiliated, and it's where people are going to most likely believe the gospel of decolonization and why decolonization is entirely important. So that is the harm you're going to get if you actively disempower. On the second level of analysis, when you actively disempower, is what is going to happen, right? We agree that religions are affiliated to a lot of things such as schools, hospitals, and all of that. So when you actively disempower, like they say, taking away those schools, taking away those hospitals, what's going to happen? The impact on the socio-economic development is going to be very diverse, because then religions that have been initially funded these particular institutions are going to stop. Second level is that entirely, you're not even going to have, what do you want to say really? So entirely, three things that you get, that's three things that are important. One, that it will not work because of like sense of unification and sense of belief. But most importantly, it will take you a lot of time to actually actively disempower. And in that process, are we actually achieving decolonization? I'll take it. Second.
The problem is people even before religion was separated, and that problem is not what I mean. But second, why is it a problem where we eliminate even Ruto from funding churches so that we protect the democracy of everyone and eliminate religion from power? Why is it a problem?
One thing you will get from the opening government speech is exclusive that they will not understand what it means by the process of decolonization and why it is very important to this debate to actually note, even if we disempowered actively, why we not achieve their one. So that argument, whether or not people believe in Mount Zion, are very inconsequential to this debate because people are not seeking because God is not colonizing, even if we take that. I think that is a very ambiguous kind of concept to bring to this debate. So, finally, I'll be giving you the impact, right? And the impact, what to make it. One that we shall not even achieve the decolonization process. Why? Inherently, because we are addressing the wrong factor. One, we tell you from opening opposition that the religion is not the major reason. It's not entirely why we are not achieving the decolonization process, because we have showed you the role of neocolonialism in continuously delaying this process, but most importantly, making it less achievable, even to that very extent, right? So, we think that actively disempowering this is one, approaching the wrong actor. Most likely it will not work, but what are the effects? Very bad, very diverse, no economic society development because of the kind of religion, the economic development that comes with religion, with schools, with hospitals. Now when you ban them, that means that religion ceases to hold them, and given their context, right, we shall continue. Actually, it goes back progressive. That means we're going to continue depending on these people for a lot of things. So, three things we just need to understand. Africans are not being colonized because of religion. That we have said. We have told you the role of neocolonialism, right? Opening government gives you no nexus as why they actually believe this religion is going to necessarily reduce the process of decolonization. But I have given you a very good argument showing you what is actually delaying the process, but showing you that even if we take them at their best, the active doing away with religion shall not address the problem. It will only worsen the factors. It will bring up a lot of chaos because people are too affiliated. But what have I told you? I've also told you that we would rather use this as a means of, like, say, taking on the information of decolonization, because this is where people are most unified and are more likely to believe you. In their world, people are going to fight you. People are going to have a lot of problems, and decolonization shall not end. Exclusively, they are attacking their own things.
Our goal is not necessarily to get rid of religion. I believe that that's like a life party. It's a bit unlikely, but that's not necessarily a bad and necessarily have to prove that there are still some valuable impacts to engage in that process of doing so. Rather, we're saying that the very goal of decolonization is simply to just strip religion of its power to blind or color our choices about our beliefs, choices about our values. So then, for example, like, why do we think certain things? Like, why do we think, let's say, African hair is ugly, or why certain color of eyes or facial structures are bad? This is just colonization. Things that color, beliefs that are being forced to us, such as color, our choices. So we then think that the actual process of decolonization or the impact that we want to reach is to question why we believe or don't believe this. We believe that's the value of impact in of itself. So first of all, to distinguish from OG very quickly. So OG talks just about the impacts of this, like no consent, about how it's being forced to us, they never obtain no choice, all this stuff. But necessarily they don't say why it's important, or rather they don't talk to us about why, even if it doesn't work, why the process itself is still quite valuable. We're going to give you that in our speech. First thing I'm going to talk to you about is just the problem of this debate. So the problem I think we want to solve is essentially colonization of the mind, as we all agree that's what's happened historically and that's what's continuing to happen right now. Because we've been filled with like commandments and threats. In religious context, we've been threatened and coerced to live a certain way. So we believe that our objective there is decolonization, is the thing we want to reach. What do we mean by that? We mean rejecting values and systems that don't necessarily serve us or that don't reflect our true values. And we're going to who decides this? We think collectively as society decides this as it changes, as it decides what it likes. Relax. Okay, so how do you think this arises? We think that in our beliefs are religious, are held firm in place that dictate our own values by like powerful actors like churches and things like that. So what do you think are the impacts? First of all, we think the impact of these horrible psychological effects on us, it influences our views and our values. For example, why we believe being gay is bad, why we believe women should wear short skirts, or why they shouldn't wear certain things. We believe that this view has been heavily influenced by the Bible. Why this is bad, of course, we have choice to make decisions about our values and beliefs. We believe that there is autonomy. But why is this necessarily bad? We believe that this is bad because we are not given a choice to reevaluate our beliefs because we are threatened by blasphemy, we are threatened by eternal hellfire, and they have significant power over us. That is economical, political, and religious powers. That all have like a religious undertones. They want us to believe what they believe, and as a result, they're going to use political and economic ways to get that. Relax. Thirdly, we believe that religion is still influenced us by the church. We believe that influence our laws and policies, and we believe that this is to repression of society collectively because we are bound by views we can't even support logically. We don't even know why we believe these things. Before I move on to my analysis on like why it's still beneficial to disempower religion, I'm going to take.
Yeah, human beings are innately spiritual. When you remove these religions from them, right, where do you expect them to access their spirituality?
Okay, let's talk about that. Clarify our stance. We don't necessarily believe it's a very we don't believe it's necessarily a very likely impact that religion just disappears just like that. What we're talking about necessarily is about the value in simply disempowering religion. What do you mean by this? First of all, let's talk about the process of disempowering religion. They mechanize it as like removing it from school and things like that. What we then believe is like just disempowering religion. So of course, whatever mechanism doesn't really matter. The mechanism is simply just like removing religion from our everyday life. Like storing in the Bible, you remove that. In class, perhaps you remove religion, and you avoid religious undertones when you're in institutions like school and work. So the mechanism isn't so important. What's important is the process necessarily in of itself. I believe this process is very valuable. Number one, because values are questioned when they otherwise wouldn't. Why wouldn't they otherwise be questioned? Because of religious influence, because of the heavy influence religion has on us, on our politics and our economies. So if there's no other option for questioning it, other than the purpose of decolonization. So secondly, we believe that there's significant social pressure and threat of backlash if you then choose to like question these values. It's heavy backlash on a macro and micro level of like rejecting religion. So why do you think it's important to question these values? First of all, self-introspection, but on a societal level. The nature of self-introspection is the way you get that necessarily is by questioning your own beliefs and looking at yourself and analyzing why you believe what you believe. For example, say if I believe certain people are less than, why do I necessarily believe them? That simple process of questioning it can reveal inconsistencies between what you think is right and what is actually right. I'll give you an example on like a societal scale. Rather, I'll give you a reason why. Because we want reason if you believe what you believe logically, so you can't reason it out. You can't reason someone out of something they didn't reason themselves into. So in the case of religion, we don't know necessarily why we don't like gay people or why we think perhaps women are less than. We don't question that because we do not get ourselves into a situation by logically taking it and by deciding as society what we value, how we don't value what's imposed on us. And that is the value that simply questioning it is going to give us. And we believe that this value is simply that we get to question these issues that will otherwise not even be addressed. Because when you bring up that issue, it's immediately refuted by saying, setting survival. Some will probably quote a Bible verse for you, that's probably what serious going to do. When quote a Bible verse, they say that's wrong because being gay is bad. God said that you should not live with another man. We believe that in this case that it's valuable to question these things because at least we'll be given a chance to question it and decide for ourselves whether it's something to believe in or not in the God. And the impact is that perhaps we'll be able to reach a more equitable belief system that equates for the marginalized society or for wider society. First of all, why is this better? The impact of this, it gives us better representation and more variety of beliefs that can then compete for dominance and acceptance. So when again we attempt to disempower religions, at least then people can then air out their voices, create discourse, and then people can compete for that. People can bring forth different competing beliefs, and then at the very least we get an equal society in which people are more likely to, where the better belief is more likely to be chosen because they've been competing and they've been given a chance to being aired out without like the reputation of the Bible. Secondly, we believe that we identify problems like that as systemically in society that would immediately be refuted. Of course, the most common example is like LGBTQ and women's rights. So we believe that the reason these things weren't questioned or will not be questioned without the process of decolonization is simply because we cannot start this process without first disempowering religion. First and foremost, we cannot protect religion at the same time attempt to solve these issues or attempt to even have a discourse around these issues. This is the benefit you exclusively get from our side. And firstly, again, we will not decide this by science or observable reality like a debate. You will just impose in us, and we believe that we should get the right to have to proud to propose. Man, you rushed away. You're ready.
Well, first of all, shout out before we start. Thank you, Limo, for carrying me to this time. I was aboard a proper airline. Right, starting in three. Oh, sorry. Right, starting in 3, 2, 1, go. The process of decolonization cannot exist in a vacuum. What government is telling you is that let's decolonize and then do nothing. What they mean, and this is why the questions you've been asking are important to OG and CG. You cannot decolonize law and then remain there. Decolonization is a return to your roots and a return to that which existed before. Yet they want to tell you, let's decolonize religion, and then what? People just stay there, believe in nothing? That was not what existed. The disempowerment of colonial religion means the empowerment of traditional African religions and the religions that existed prior to the coming of religion before. Because that's why I asked them, religion is people are inherently religious. So before even the colonialists came, people believed in something. They prayed facing Mount Kenya. They prayed in their shrines. They cannot talk about disempowering that religion without talking about why the traditional African religions would provide the same form of utility. 2 points of context in this debate. One, the disempowerment of colonial religion and all the harms that OG tells you about religion exists symmetrically in their world to the extent that people opt into other forms of religion that impose value systems on them. Those same religions coerce their choice. Those same religions put them in a position where you follow the rules and norms of that religion. So none of the benefits OG is talking about actually happen. Because when people opt into another option, does that mean that my traditional African religion is not telling me where to get married, where to pray? They told me all those things they are talking about happen in their world. 2, this motion is not a this house prefers motion. They cannot fiat that it's going to happen well. None of their arguments in their side show that this process could happen in a way that is good and in a way that is successful. They just give you all the metaphysical principles that exist in the hypothetical air. We don't need principles. We must understand how this process will work and how it will work. Thirdly, human beings are spiritual, so they opt into some form of spirituality. We tell you why it's going to happen better in our world. And the aim of this debate, before I move on to dealing with these people, is that it's about the process of decolonization. The burden of Gav was to show you that we can decolonize when we remove religion. That religion is a hindrance to our process of decolonization. If I can show you religion is not hindering our process of decolonization, they cannot win. 1, how is religion not hindering our process of decolonization? We think, and this is so important, that the Africans, understanding the imposition of these religions on them, understood the utility of religion to their lives.
However, they noted the colonial tenets that underpin some of these religions, which is why the process of decolonization or the process of Africanization is something that is so important. We have Africanized colonial religion and made it our own. We were told at the beginning, you show up at church in a suit. Now we show up in our kitenges. They told us we cannot pay bride price. Now Christianity allows you to pay your bride price. We have made these religions our own, and even if we believe that religion has its problems, it is not hindering our process of decolonization to the extent that human beings, through our agency as Africans, opted against those colonial tenets that we thought were oppressive and harming our ability and expression as Africans. We think that that Africanization process was important. Just to exacerbate this, I'm going to show you why. There was a necessity for us to do this. What was the necessity? 3 reasons. 1, we needed buy-in from individuals. Traditional Africans did not want to buy into these religions, and Africans thought that this could necessarily limit them. To create that buy-in, we allowed them to come and be polygamous, even within our Christianity. We said it's okay, you can have 4 wives if you already had them before, but convert to religion. We accepted them. We allowed people to go get married in churches, but you can do it in your own ways. We think that that process, we allowed them to personalize it. We allow them to make it more proximate in order to maximize their utility and happiness. This is what exacerbated the process of us Africanizing that religion. They want to disempower it completely. We are telling you that our necessity has made us make this product something that we can relate with, something that we can buy into. This is necessarily important. 2, why can you not disempower religion? And this is absolutely important. Religion has become intrinsic to the fundamental existence of a person. Why is this important? Our identity and personhood is now tied to religion. Look at it like this. Your name is now based on a religious identity. Samuel Kagia, Esther who, I don't know what you call. It's personal to you. All rites of passage, even within the African context, now have religious connotations. But we have to call baby showers and pray, christening, all those things. Your marriage is in a church. Even now we're getting circumcised in Christian camps. These things are fundamental to your identity. Disempowering it, removing it, is not just an attack and an assault on the person or the individual, but a vitiation of your right to receive utility and happiness from the things that make you more proximate and bring you closer to your God. That's why we think that this is the 2 conclusions of this argument. We are decolonizing ourselves, even within the system. We don't need to disempower the religion for us to achieve the aim of decolonization. They need to approve that religion is limiting our ability to decolonize. 2, even if they are right, the harms cannot outweigh the benefits to the extent that you're now vitiating people's personhood to achieve something called decolonization. We prioritize the ability of people to access that happiness for them to be able to do that. Tell me. That's another view. Human beings are spiritual beings. 1, to the extent that there is a higher purpose, to the extent that we are socially conditioned to believe in religion, to the extent that we suffer every day and we look for meaning, to the extent that we look for happiness. Everyone seeks religion, and religion is important to them. Why then do we think this is what? The comparative first principle. What decolonization and what going back means. The African traditional religion will do all the same harms, yet at the same time we leave this gap where people cannot be able to access these things. Why is this important? For us to go back to our roots, to go back to what we are, they need to approve that there are systems and structures for us to go there. Do we have the traditional people who used to tell us what our religion meant? They no longer exist. Where are the shrines that we used to pray? They no longer exist. What is our understanding of the religion? It's minimal even in this room. We cannot transit to what they want because those systems no longer exist. Therefore, they cannot provide the utility that they want. 2, the process of disempowerment is like to come with harms. Or telling people with backlash. That's not important. What is important? The church and the state are married. You cannot separate the 2. We go for national prayers. We go for national things. Mashujaa starts with prayers from everyone. You cannot separate the 2. To that extent, those 2 systems cannot be integrated in a way that doesn't bring backlash. 2, international law now represents our right to achieve and our freedom of religion. They will not allow you to disempower to the extent that you're harming people's ability to opt into something that brings them happiness and the freedom of religion. This means that the process is going to be polarizing, it's going to be bloody, it's going to bring division and religiosity that causes more harm than good. Individuals can choose their religion. If you don't want to be a Muslim, you can be a Christian. If you don't want religion, Chantal is an atheist. She'll tell you. So you can opt out, and we think this is important. Lastly, who is the actor? They need to prove that they will do this well.
Yeah.
I've never been ordered to beat her.
Start by quickly answering the question that was posed by C. Decolonize and then what? The answer to this is regain spiritual autonomy of our own beliefs. That is what we are actually aiming at. They talk about, they come to us telling us that we have choice, but we have clearly shown you how this choice is manipulated, and for this for this reason, therefore, it's not actually a free choice. Because number one, these religions are actually very embedded in our systems, as has been clearly proven. In our schools, for example, at Daystar, you cannot even graduate if you didn't attend chapel services. We think, how then has that become a choice? How then can you opt out of that if it's in a system that you have to go through in order to actually graduate? We think that is pathetic. Secondly, they ask us, how do these processes work? But this has actually been provided. For example, we want these programs or these subjects to be omitted from schools. We want, when politicians are being sworn in, we don't use the Bible or the Quran. These are ways of how these processes are going to actually start. And this will in turn lead in separation of state and church gradually, because it's the systems that make it intertwined. If we keep up, if we break down these systems, then that marriage is actually there's a divorce. So, now, what we hear from opening opposition, they are not quite relevant. However, they talk about something about all religion is open to interpretation. But this is not right, because even in the cases where this might actually be true, who makes the last call? Isn't this the Roman Catholic Church if we are a Christian state? Those are the people who actually come up with the last call. It doesn't matter how much you want to Africanize that religion. In the end, you are still using the same Bible. Are you going to create a different Bible? And then, how will that actually be? If you want to alter the Bible and create your own, then does that still remain the religion that was brought up to us by colonialism? We think no. Secondly, they talk to us how Simon talks to us how there has actually been buy-in from individuals. We ask to them, in which way? We think actually it's because they had no other option. And why is this the case? Because number one, social pressure. And how does social pressure come about? It starts at home. Family indoctrination. From beginning, you're being sent to Sunday school. You're being sent to these schools, I don't know, to learn about some sort of religion. We think it starts there. That pressure, how then did you actually buy into such a thing? We think that is quite absurd. Secondly, they talk to us how it is going to actually, the process is going to be bloody and all there's going to be division in society. First of all, we do not think, first of all, we need to understand that actually the division that is created with religion is a lot more worse. Why? Because it creates a cult-like following that actually makes you even develop some sort of hatred to people who do not believe, who do not have your self-belief system. At least, however, even if we were to go back to our traditional religions or beliefs, at least it was not more so of you are wrong and I am right. It was more so you believe in the God of water, I believe in the God of the mountains. And then people could still actually live in harmony much better in this case. Secondly, what do you want? You're actually distracting me. Yeah. So now, this social pressure then develops and creates some sort of Stockholm syndrome. Even the people who want to die for these religions, it's the Stockholm syndrome. Why? Because it was indoctrinated to them. They have believed it, they've internalized it, and they have actually made it a part of themselves. They've fallen in love for it, and they do not even know why. Because they were not told to, they were just told, this is how it is, and therefore, like that. Therefore, this way, we do not agree with it. Lastly, fire, relax.
Relax. So, what if, even in the case whereby our benefits are actually never met, we still think this is an important point of the process of decolonization. Why? Because, as we have clearly proven, it was used as a tool to brainwash and control these people. And therefore, meaning that if we still maintain this religion, we still have ties to this colonialization. So these effects still affect us because of the links we still have with them through this religion. And we think that in itself is justifiable to why we should actually
Just continue.
yeah, let me just continue. Now, as we have clearly shown you, there's no choice, and if there is, it's manipulated choice. However, even with choice, why is it still important? We think, as we have clearly shown you, it's important because we need to reclaim autonomy of our own belief. Number two, these religions, as I've clearly shown, it was used as a tool to brainwash them, and it was also used as a tool to demonize traditional practices. Yeah, and therefore people start believing that people who believe in traditional doctors and everything are bad people, and therefore will rot in hell. And we think that is actually very bad. We think this brainwash that is actually happening, it doesn't provide people with an informed choice of what they want to do or what they should do. Hey, Pasha.
This time was taken.
How? 15 seconds.
Yes.
Let me. So, as I was saying, even with choice, this choice we have already proven to you how it's actually manipulated, and this brainwash doesn't therefore provide people with an informed choice when making these choices in opting in these belief systems. And the fact that they are not actually open to interpretation makes it even difficult for you to even make it come up with your own interpretation. Why? Oh, blasphemy. Oh, you cannot speak like that. Why? Because the Bible says so. We think that's actually a very absurd reason to why we should actually keep them. Therefore, even their process of Africanizing these religions becomes even a lot more difficult because of these blaspheming traits that we get from religious people. Wakanda forever.
Oh, hey, Wakanda forever. Hey.
So, Hannah, we think that the first thing in this house before is unity, right? And we think that this is because principally, right? We know how to relate, right? We think that the arguments that we get from OG and also part of CG, right, as to why religion, for example, is such a horrible thing, why religion in this case is something that's dominating, why religion is invasive, right? But we also see the solution that they do in itself, right? Is imposing of individuals' personal, imposing of individuals' choices as they exist, right? I think the burden that they wanted to reach today was one, right? Prove to us why religion in the current status quo that we live in, right, is limiting our ability to be colonized, right? I think that's important because we need more contextualization of what decolonization looks like, where we decolonize, right, and what the process looks like. Thirdly, right, we think that they can't fear the thing of process and say that you don't have to do the process. We think that it's not at this house of contribution. We have to see how this is done because we think that if it has negative impact specifically towards certain individuals, you have to prove why it's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, right? But I think we'll begin first by engaging. Yeah. Okay. So now, OG gives us no form of alternative, right? They give us no comparative. But at the same time, the method that they propose in this debate, right, is an imposition, specifically one annexation or the removal of like
the removal of like structures such as like churches, removing the church land, removing like educational structures that exist within, removing just generally where religion pervades, right? But they also want to say religion will still exist, and we think that this is unlikely. We think that Mashujaa has given you analysis as to what's most likely to happen, right? If you remove something, it either means that you're detracting towards a separate religion that's existing. In that, are we going back to traditional society religions? We think that one, this is highly unlikely because one, this was highly crippled due to the process of colonization. We tell you two, this is also highly unlikely, right? Because individuals have developed personhood within the aspect of colonial religions such as like Christianity. There's a reason that if I die today, I'll probably be married and I'll have a church service. There's a reason that if I get married, I'm going to get married to a church. And there's a reason that a lot of my personhood is tied specifically to this religion, right? But also, importantly, right, they don't characterize to you how I opt into that religion, and it's not necessarily something that's imposed in the kind of status, right? We think that it's important when you characterize OG's harms, right, to not necessarily look at them within the existence of colonization, as they say, right? They say that, oh, look, they came in with the Bible and they forced us to read this Bible, right? They told you that, for example, this was then imposed, and then this, and then this, for example, is a harm that exists, and then that's what they use to try and prove legitimacy, right? However, we tell you that one, due to the aspect of Africanization and internalization of religion that currently exists, right? It's the reason, for example, if we want to decolonize, we won't say that we now wear like clothes because this is a very Western concept, right? We think that we can still be able to live within our African societies and hold African personhood, right? While still wearing clothes. They need to show us why this is something that's like crucially essential to the process of decolonization. True, right? Where do we decolonize, right? We think that we've been able to show you that when you decolonize, for example, academia, right? You do this because there's a hegemonic voice of Eurocentric ideas that generally tends to dominate the space, right? And that's an outcome that subsists to this day. It means that as an African writer, I won't be able to write, and my voice won't be heard, for example, because of the state that I'm in. I tell you, when we decolonize, for example, law, it means that then we'll substitute to like rely on traditional law. We'll substitute like rely on traditional law, and we tell you that then there's a sort of necessity that's created within this, right? But thirdly, right, Ali and other OG want to paint the premise of like legitimacy without proving to us any active harms that exist in the state as well, right? Okay. Secondly, right, I think before we come back to OG, right, we'll deal with CG. I think CG is like slightly more confused in this debate, right? I think CG tries to tell you how you're going to separate the church and the state, but first let's know that's not the debate. I think on a different day we can argue why it's important to separate the church and the state, right? But secondly, if you remove the church or if you separate the church and the state, right, whatever alternative we tell you is going to come about, whether it's going to be, for example, a traditional society or whatever, it's still going to have an imposition with individual minds, right? So you're still going to have a unification of whatever religion or whatever like belief that is within the state. Right? You tell me that individuals are spiritual beings, and you can't say that there won't exist an alternative, and hence you have to defend that, right? More so, right? We tell you that at the end of the day, what you're going to do, given how like tied and how like important specifically religion is to individuals, is one, if you take it away and you try to take it back to subsisting like traditional values, right? We tell you that's going to be highly unlikely to be something that's going to be that's going to pass. Because I think we've also told you, what do you know even about like your personal or like traditional religion, any traditional religions, right? But to tell you secondly, if you take that away, it's going to be an imposition, one, on individuals who have opted into like current religion that we have, right? I'm telling you that, and what that means in this day, right, is I'm not, like, for example, a practicing Christian because a white man forced me down my throat. I'm a practicing Christian because I think there exists opt-in and opt-out mechanisms that exist, right? And hence, that's not something that we're here to engage with in this debate, right? So, I'll take you.
Okay. So, to the extent whereby we eliminate these powerful structures, we increase the religious liberation because we don't want to eliminate it entirely, but we eliminate it.
Okay, so I get your view, right? I'm thinking. Yes. Okay, so what Ali wants to tell you is that one, they're going to like remove, for example, Catholic churches, they're going to remove Catholic institutions, such like what Strathmore is. They're going to remove, for example, a lot of like institutional religious structures that currently exist, right? One, they have to defend how this is going to be done, which I told you they have examples, right? But secondly, they're telling you that this is going to have very detrimental effects. I tell you that majority of African aid is reliant on like Catholic relief services, Islamic aid services, and even like outside of that, right? I tell you, even at the end of the day, you're going to take away that Catholic church, and that's my means for getting married. And for example, and at the end of the day, you don't know what exact end you're trying to achieve. And I think what we're able to prove to you is at the end of the day, right? right? What they'll be proving, I mean, what the impact that they'll have specifically on this, right, won't even have the positive impact on the individual that they want to tell us. Because we think at the end of the day, the best person in who to measure, like, who we're most likely to impact in this debate is like the actor, who's the individual, right? If you're going to take away my spiritual autonomy because I have opted into Catholicism and take away, for example, the church or the Catholic school that I choose to study in, I'm telling you that furthermore, you're going to be imposing whatever narrative you have that's not necessarily even colonial, right? Because you're just going to have to be taken away from it, and you haven't proven to me why in this case, religion is actively tied to like neocolonialism, not neocolonialism, but like active colonialism that we have today. But panels, why do we think that we're like extremely distinct from opening opposition, right? We think that one, opening opposition takes a stand with like how neocolonialism is something that's like very important, and I think how they tell you, for example, that this is something that will take long, and how, for example, it's not necessarily one because it's going to have certain effects, right? We tell you that this is highly symmetrical, and this is something that I think also exists in CG in this debate, right? We tell you that whatever alternative that you're trying to give us, for example, if you're telling us our values are influenced by something, right? Gay people, for example, or the impacts, for example, religion specifically has on women. We tell you whatever alternative you create is going to be very symmetric to the human being because both of these exist within impositions. Thank you.